Pneumococcal pneumonia and pleurisy. That's right. What are you going to do to relieve the pain in pleurisy? Strap the chest. What's caused by reversible airway obstruction? Asthma. What's the drug of choice? Epinephrine, which appears naturally in the medulla of the adrenal glands. What's another name for epinephrine? Adrenaline, also known as susprin. S-U-S-P-R-I-N. Got all kind of names. Remember, if a person had a case of epididymitis and it was really bad, what might you have to do? Inject the spermatic cord with procaine hydrochloride and get beat severely about the head and shoulders. What do you think of when you think of 30 to 40 bowel movements? Non-specific ulcerative colitis. What time sick call normally held aboard ship? 09, or as directed by the CO. What's not recommended in a peptic ulcer? Bland feedings and milk is not recommended. The drug that's not recommended is aspirin. Remember, the drug that's used for peptic ulcer is cimetidine, also known as Tagamet. Pneumococcal pneumonia, what percent? It's the cause of what percent of all primary bacterial pneumonias? 60 to 80%. What is used for recurrent attacks of gouty arthritis? Xyloprim for recurrent. How about acute attacks? Indocin is used for acute attacks. What fungus infection of the external ear results from poor hygiene, swimming, and favors warm, moist climates? Otomycosis. And remember the other one, caused by chronic otitis media, allergies, trauma, blood dyscrasia, cardiovascular disease is Labyrinth's disease. What's the difference between lymphangitis and lymphadenitis? Okay, lymphadenitis is a lymph node, and lymphangitis is a lymph vessel. If a person had an insect in the ear, the first thing you do would be shine a bright light. If that failed, you would use kerosene or alcohol. They won't have the match on there. And if a person had vegetable origin in the ear, such as a pea, remember, you would not irrigate with water, saline. First you would try wire curette. If the curette didn't work, then you would use irrigated with alcohol or light oil. That wouldn't cause it to swell. What part of the body is not normally affected by contact dermatitis? The scalp. What condition is found in 2/3 of all adult white males, rarely found in blacks? Psoriasis. What's the most common dermatitis? Acne. What's the drug of choice? Tetracycline is a drug of choice. Urticaria, which is hives, is most commonly found or caused by what foods? Shellfish, eggs, milk, and what drug primarily? Penicillin. If you're at sea and you're radioing for advice, know that you would indicate the ship's location of physical findings and the patient's complaint and symptoms. What is the most widely used drugs for migraines? Caprigot, which is also known as ergotamine tartrate. What will help prevent cluster headaches from becoming vascular headaches? Sansert. What drug is contradicted in migraine? Codeine is contradicted. Now this question you'll get on the second exam when you have emergency procedures too, but you very seldom ever see an exam that they don't have this on for first or chief. What chronic disorder of the pituitary gland or hypothalamus, which is a result of a deficiency of vasopressin, also called the antidiuretic hormone or ADH? That is diabetes insipidus. What would you use to treat trichomonas vaginitis? Flagyl, but it's contradicted in pregnant women. What would you use Monostat 7 vaginal cream for? Monella vaginitis. What's the most predominant symptom of trichomonas vaginitis? Leukorrhea. And a lot of times on the exam they'll ask you what would you use for trichomonas vaginitis, and the answer they want is just a vinegar douche. If a patient complained of a bad taste in the mouth, a tooth that felt longer than the others, constant throbbing pain in the affected area, an increase of pain when chewing or lying down, and would have a small gum boil, he should be suspected of having what? A periapical abscess. And what's the most frequent cause of marginal gingivitis? Poor oral hygiene. What's the most frequent cause of severe dental pain? Acute pulpitis. And what's the most common cause of cavities? Bacterial plaque. And cavities first appear as a chalky white spot. If a person had inflammation of the third molar, the wisdom tooth, that is. Pericorditis appears more frequently in what age group? 18 to 25. How many types of tooth fractures? 4. First is, one is a chip fracture, you would use what? Sandpaper and varnish. 2 is slight pulp exposure. 3, much pulp exposure. 4, fracture of the root. If a person got a tooth knocked loose in a fight, that would be a type 4. And remember that 4 can only be confirmed by an x-ray exam. So I don't know how they can make that statement. I guess after you get the x-ray. Dental classes. If a person hasn't been seen by a dental officer or lost his dental record, he would be class 4. What color? Red. 1 is white, 2 green, and 3 yellow. What's the most common anesthetic used in dentistry? Xylocaine, also known as xylocaine. And remember that when you combine it with epinephrine, the dose should not be more than 300 milligrams max. If you anesthetize something, if you're sewing them up, what's the max dose? 50 cc's of a 1% solution. So what's the most common sewage disposal system used aboard ship? CHT, which is collecting, holding, and transfer. Remember, when you flush the hoses after you're done, it should be with high pressure salt water for how long? 10 minutes. And how would you detect leaks? Paper towel test. What insect ranks number 1 transmission disease? Mosquitoes number 1, flies number 2. The strongest insect trapper is the fly. And remember that larviciding is impractical in a large program because the breeding places are too scattered. How would you determine and destroy cockroach populations? Pyrethrum, to determine and to destroy cockroach populations. If you receive water from an area where amoebiasis or hepatitis is prevalent, it's got to be chlorinated too. 2.0 parts per million after a 30-minute contact time. If you receive it from an unapproved source, 2.0 parts per million after a 30-minute contact time. If you receive it from an approved source, 0.2 parts per million after 30-minute contact time. Remember, everything is either 0.2 or 2 parts except. Blister bag is 5 parts per million. Remember that everything is a 30-minute contact time except Iodine tablets must be what color? Steel gray and not stuck together. Remember that if you use iodine in a canteen, if the water's clear, you would use 1. If it was cloudy, you'd use. Place the tablet in the canteen, put the lid on loosely, you shake it for 5 minutes. Tighten the cap, let it sit an additional 20 minutes. Total time for iodine is 25 minutes. You disinfect water in a 5-gallon can, how many tablets? 20 tablets. You put in the can, swish it around 5 minutes, let it set an additional 20 minutes. Total time is 25 minutes. What's the minimum amount of water per man per day for drinking and cooking? 2 gallons, all purposes. 12 to 35 gallons. Hoses used for drinking water should be labeled. Potable water every 10 feet on the hose. What color nozzle? A blue nozzle. And remember, it's kept in what type of locker? A vermin-proof locker 12 to 18 inches above the deck. Remember, the only thing you can use seawater for in port is for fighting fires. Water must be assumed to be polluted when ships in formation are how far apart? Less than 1,000 yards. What's the test that's used in the Navy to determine bacteriological analysis of water? Membrane filter technique. And what is used to determine chlorine residual water? The Palin DPD. Remember, when you do a membrane filter technique, a greenish gold metallic sheen indicates E. coli, coliform bacteria, or fecal contamination. What form would you use to fill out a bacteriological analysis of water? A DD 686. Water test logs kept for how long? 2 years, the same as. Deceit and affairs reports. What else? Evaluations. Who? Water log is kept for 2 years. What mosquito transmits yellow fever? Aedes aegypti, dengue fever. The Aedes, malaria. Anopheles and the Culex transmits filariasis and encephalitis. And what's the most serious form of malaria? Falciparum. What disease is contact with walking barefoot in water with the infective snail? Schistosomiasis. How about walking barefoot in the soil? Hookworm. What's the most common disease transmitted to man by mites? Scrub typhus, which is also known as Tsutsugamuchi. What's the temperature on milk on delivery? 40 degrees on delivery in the mess hall. 32 to 40 degrees. The tit is no greater than 1/4 inch. What's the temperature of fresh eggs? 32 degrees. Fresh eggs are not over 30 days old. And remember that freshly processed eggs have been preserved by dipping in a warm mineral. So what's the temperature? 100 to 110 degrees. When you think 100 degrees, you think of what? Probably because I didn't tell you. Sitz bath is 100 degrees. Hot, or if you thaw out a frostbitten part, it is 100 to 105. Hot compresses is 110. The hottest temperature the hands can stand is 125. And remember that that's also the temperature of the hot water bottle. What's the temperature of the final rinse manually washing dishes? 170. How about a dishwashing machine? 180 to 195. What's the temperature of the water in the 5 GI cans in the field? 212. If a person has rose-colored spots on the trunk, lymphoid tissue involvement, and enlargement of the spleen, you think of what condition? Typhoid fever. What do you think of also when you think of typhoid fever? It's always on the test. That ain't going to help you, though. Remember that the disease is transmitted primarily through the fly or water. It's typhoid, cholera, and amoebic dysentery. Amoebic dysentery causative agent. Endomoeba histolytica. What's the causative agent for plague? Pastorella pestis or Yersinia pestis. What's the causative agent for gonorrhea? Neisseria gonorrhea. What's the causative agent for syphilis? Treponema pallidum. What's the incubation period for syphilis? 10 to 10. 10 days to 10 weeks. Incubation period for gonorrhea? 2 to 7 days, not 2 to 9. The study guide says 2 to 7, but that's wrong. One of the third classes come up and told me I was wrong. But I'm sure it's 2 to 9 somewhere, because I wouldn't have put 2 to 9 on there if I didn't see it somewhere. Might be in the 50-10. Pardon? Yeah, well, a lot of them is going to show up the next day anyway, so it don't matter. Remains to be buried at sea, how deep? 100 fathoms, which is 600 feet. How far from the nearest land? 3 miles. How many holes? 22-inch holes. How many bands minimum? 5 minimum, preferably 6 3/4-inch bands. Weighted to 300 pounds. What's the instruction? What's the instruction on the seat in the first manual? BUMED or NABMED common instruction 5360.1. The commanding officer got a red letter of condolence within. 48. The casualty assistance calls officer got to make a call within. 24. The call should be made between 06 and 2200. Also remember that the casket should be drilled, weighted, and vanned at the funeral home nearest the port of embarkation. Unless specifically requested by the next of kin, remains will not be shipped to arrive at a destination on Thanksgiving, 22 to 26 December, and New Year's Day. If you had a disaster where you had a lot of people die, remember that you would pick the person that lived the farthest and the farthest, and you would pick a spot in the middle. What's authorized? Transportation for the primary and secondary next of kin and 2 blood relatives. What is not authorized within CONUS? MAC flights is not authorized within CONUS, only outside CONUS. To minimize cellular deterioration, remains should be refrigerated at 36 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 2.2 to 4.4 degrees centigrade. What manual would you look to for honors for burial at sea? Navy regs. Chronological numbered progress reports should be dispatched to BUMED every 24 hours when search, recovery, identification operations continue for more than 36 hours. So watch how that's worded. And remember, if you find additional portions of remains, you got to notify BUMED by priority message. Who's responsible for headstones and markers? The VA. Arlington National Cemetery comes under the Department of the Army. And other national cemeteries come under the Director, Chief Memorial Affairs Director, VA in D.C. How many types of cemeteries? 3. Open, active, closed, inactive, new, they're planned, but they're not open yet. And what type of control does BUMED exercise over Navy plots and cemeteries? Technical control. Remember that an autopsy must be performed if a person dies and they were an air crew member. What is the appropriation symbol that covers the Deceit and Affairs program?
9L.
No, 9L is bulk medical supplies. That's bulk, all right. In the appropriation symbol, 17 would identify what? The Department of the Navy. 19 is State. 21 is Department of the Army. 57 Air Force, and 97 is the Department of Defense. 1804 is Operation and Maintenance Navy. This is a BUMED open allotment. 1880, and that's care of the dead. What chapter in the manual medical department? 17, manual medical department. What's the max allowable stopover time for an escort? 72 hours or 3 days. Remember, the escort should be of the same rank as the person that died, same service, but don't necessarily have to be. Remember, anything with deceit and affairs, if it doesn't cost the Navy additional money and it makes the next of kin feel better, you're going to do it. Remember, the person should be buried in blues. If they want to bury in whites or civilian clothes, it's going to happen. Primary next of kin gets a flag. If a secondary next of kin wants a flag, you're going to give them a flag. What about that civilian indigent that dies on the steps of a hospital? He's authorized everything except where he's going to be buried. What is a certificate of death overseas? The DD 2064. How many copies? 3 copies along with 2 copies of the statement of recognition, which is a DD 565. It will accompany the remains from all overseas areas except Guam you use. Civil death certificate, how many copies? 3 copies along with 2 copies of the DD 565, the statement of recognition. Where does the original 2064 go? In the closed out health records. When you close out the health record because somebody died, where would you make an entry? Standard Form 600, the chronological record of medical care, and the NAVMed 6150/4, which is the abstract of service medical history. Where would you make an entry if a person got a waiver for a physical condition? 88 and 600. What's the form that the CACO would give to the next of kin so that they could claim anything that they spent? A DD 1375 is a request for payment of funeral and or interment expenses. And when they fill it out, they have how many years? 2 years. And when they fill it out, how many copies? 5 copies. You know your stuff, don't you? I tell you what, by the end of the week, I'm going to put you up here and I'm going to sit down there. How's that? If I was called back as an escort, how would I be treated? As a civilian. What's the page 1 in the service record? Page 1 is a reenlistment contract, which is a NAVPERS 1070/601. What else? The DD Form 4. Remember, the DD Form 4 is a document that establishes a legal relationship between the person and the government on enlistment. Or, if they got out and they stayed out longer than 24 hours and they come back in on the DD Form 4. That is the page 1. Page 2. Record of emergency data, how many parts? 2 parts. Part 1 is dependence allowances. Part 2 is people to be notified in the case of emergency. It also lists civilian insurance companies. What did I tell you in OCR about the page 2? Remember that all NAVPERS forms go to NMPC except the NAVPERS 1070/602, which is a record of emergency data. It goes to Navy Finance Center. All NAVCOMP forms go to the Navy Finance Center. All NAVPERS forms go to NMPC except 602. 603. Enlisted classification record. Remember, that lists any schooling you had prior to joining the military. Your hobbies, your interests, your basic battery scores. Remember, that form cannot be altered unless you have specific approval of NMPC. And normally the only time it is altered is if a person retakes the ASVAB. Page 4. Navy Occupation Training and Awards History. Any education you have achieved since you've been in the Navy, be it service schools, correspondence courses, military leadership exam, PARS, anything you do to go up for rate, to get qualified to go up for rate. It also lists primary and secondary NECs, anytime that you're issued a medal, good conduct, Navy achievement. It also lists the different dates that you made rank on the back of the page 4. Page 5. History of assignments is a chronological listing of all ships or stations or hospitalization a person had since they've been in the Navy. What's the big thing I told you about it? Dispersing officer has to sign the page 5 if a person got a reenlistment bonus. Remember also that when that person transfers, you make an entry on the 5, the 9, and the 13. The page 5 in the service record is comparable to what form in the health record? The abstract of service and medical history. Page 6, record of UA of more than 24 hours. If a person's UA for less than 24 hours and they go to mass, they would be recorded on the page 13. 7, court memorandum. If a person is found guilty by a court-martial when it's approved by the convening authority or anything that affected the person's pay. If that guy was UA for less than 24 hours went to mass and he got busted or fined, you'd make a page 7 because the 13 is not an OCR document and they couldn't take the money out of his pay. No 8, 9. Enlisted no 8, 9, I said. I said no 8, 9. I'm going to put you up here. 9 is enlisted performance evaluation. What must be contained on the page 9? A recommendation for advancement. Remember that when a person is coming up on their discharge, in order for them to get an honorable discharge, they must have an average of 2.7 or higher. Except in military bearing, they have to have a 3.0. What is an honorable discharge? A DD 256N, 257N is general. 794N is under other than honorable conditions. 259 is a big chicken dinner, a bad conduct discharge. Remember that it can only be approved by a general or special court-martial. And DD 260N is a dishonorable discharge, and it can only be approved by a general court. Okay, where we at? 9. Okay, your symbols. A periodic evaluation or annual evaluation is P, special, S, transfer, T, and meritorious or mass would be M. Page 10, record of personnel action. Anytime you make rank or get busted, if you are a foreign national, you become a U.S. citizen, or if you are drawing pro pay, you'd have a page 10. 11, record of discharge from the Navy Reserve. Remember, a lot of times they'll ask you retirement, or I'm sorry, not record of discharge. See, you didn't catch me. That's record of Navy Reserve, not discharge. If a person, they ask you all the time, retirement points earned would be indicated on what form in the service record to page 11. Remember that the reserves get so many points toward retirement if they do correspondence courses, and it will be indicated on that page. No 12. But remember what I told you the first day about the page, or not the page 12, but what form in the service record is a NAV comp / NAV pers form. STO, the standard transfer order. 613. Administrative remarks. Remember, it's a catch-all. Person's issued a 45, make an entry. A person's counsel concerning derogatory performance, make an entry. A person's counsel concerning drugs or alcohol, Make an entry. Remember, any question you get on that test, if you have no earthly idea what the hell the answer is and the 13's on there, I'd take it. Remember that if a person is involuntarily extended, you'd make an entry on the page 13. If they voluntarily extend, they would have
21 if active duty, 22 if reserve.
if they were active duty, they'd have a NAVPERS 1070/621, and if they were reserve, they'd have a NAVPERS 1070/622. 621 is also known as the 1 Alpha. 622 is also known as the 1 Bravo. Remember that senior chief that got out after 25 years? The war broke out and he got called back in. What did he sign? No, not 1 Alpha. He signed a 1 Bravo, who's in the reserves. He done cut his throat and got out. And the record of Navy Reserve is the 614 that's listed in the book as the 615. It's confusing as hell, but remember that that is a discharge from the Navy Reserve. The DD-214 is the discharge from active duty. Remember, that's probably the most important piece of paper you can have in the service record, because they use it to determine what you're eligible for when you get out. Remember, when a person gets out of the Navy, you'd give them what forms? 345 and DD-214. How many companies? Medical battalion? 7. H&S, 2 shock and surgical companies, and 4 collecting and clearing companies. 1 shock and surgical company equals how many collecting and clearing companies? 2. How many corpsman rifle companies? Rifle? 11 corpsmen in a rifle company. How many corpsmen assigned to H&S company? 65. Who is a preventive medicine technician assigned to? H&S company. How many stretcher bearers in an infantry battalion? 24 in an infantry battalion. What MMARD ship has the greatest medical capability? An LHD. How many medical people? 604 medical people on an LHD. How many ORs? 6 ORs. Keep them in order. Remember the DUH that we had? The LHD, the LHA, and the LPH. DAH. How many medical people on LHA? 178. 4 ORs. And on an LPH, 109 and 2 ORs. Casualty receiving and treatment ships indicate that they can take casualties by doing what at night? A blinking green light. What do key medical people, what ship are key medical people on? The LCC. Key medical people such as your task force surgeon. Okay, get out your health record. Which one? Okay. That'll work. We sure in hell ain't gonna be done with all the other ones either today. Hell, I must have answered all the questions on food sanitation. What number are we on? 7. Jesus. Which of the below is not true concerning requirements of milk pasteurization? Pasteurization plants must have a compliance rating of 90 or more. How long can you keep leftovers? 36 hours. What official must inspect all meat, meat products, poultry, and poultry products intended for interstate shipment? United States Department of Agriculture. How about fish, shellfish? USDC, United States Department of Commerce. Remember, the stamping of the meat indicates the condition of the meat at the time of packing. Remember that if you store meat at slightly higher temperature than those recommended, it cuts the storage life of the meat in half. Which of the below is not a sign that fish has been refrozen? Red borders eyes. A lot of times on the exam they'll ask you what's the sign that fish has been refrozen, and the answer they want is ice in the bottom of the box. But those other three are too. Remember that a fresh fish has bright red gills. It's firm, elastic to touch. Know that the temperature of fresh fish on delivery is 28 to 35. And know that if you've got seafood on display in the commissary, when you remove it at the end of the day, it's got to be stored at between 28 and 32. So you can keep basically the 28 degrees and up a little bit. What describes a can with flat ends, one end of which may be forced in a convex position when the other is brought down sharply on a flat surface? A flipper. Remember, if you got a can that's got the end out and you can force it back with your finger, that is a springer. Remember, you push it back in, you release it, pops back out. You got a can where you got a lot of formation of gas inside and you can't force it back in. You strike it against something sharp, the other end flips out, that's a flipper. And the most advanced form of deterioration in canned goods is a sweller. Remember, foods that's still good are classified as a springer. Coffee, not molasses. Remember, keep them straight. Springer is coffee and sweller is molasses, because a lot of times they'll ask it that way. Pinholes in canned goods are due to the action of acid. Another question they ask all the time is, what is semi-perishable food? Know that it's canned, dried, and dehydrated. What's the ideal temperature for the storage of eggs? 32 degrees, and fresh eggs are not over 30 days old. Leftovers, when they're to be reused, should be placed in a shallow container with a depth no greater than 3 inches. What distance should be allowed between the tops of stacks of meat and the open air ducts in the refrigerator? 6 inches. Change. No longer 2 feet. It's 6 inches. Another question they may ask you on thawing food. Know that thawing food at room temperature is only approved aboard ship in an emergency or when microwave ovens and refrigerated equipment is down. Which below is not true concerning food storage procedures? That's right. You can store medical supplies aboard ship in the refrigerator with food if it's kept under separate lock and key. But remember that at your reefers, on the outside of your reefers, you should have a piece of paper that's basically a log. You should check the temperature twice a day, just like your biologicals, your reefers that contain biologicals. There should be a piece of paper outside the reefer saying that you checked the temperature twice a day. And remember that the temperature should be within a plus or minus 3 degrees to the recommended temperature. Also, if you store eggs and butter in the same compartment with fruits and vegetables, it's going to give eggs and butter a funny taste. So you really shouldn't do it. Also, if you store fruits and vegetables in the same compartment and the temperature gets over 40 degrees, it may cause carbon dioxide gas. If you receive green leafy vegetables of an unknown origin, it's got to be superchlorinated at 100 parts per million for 15 minutes, or 50 parts per million for 30 minutes. When you think 100 parts per million, you should also think of what? The fresh water hose. When you take on potable water, you should subject the interior of the hose at a chlorine solution of 100 parts per million. And you should run it for how long? No, that's for sewage, babe. 30 seconds to 1 minute. And when you think 30 seconds to 1 minute, you should also think of what? Saffron and the gram stain. I'll get you guys thinking along my line before we're done. What's the recommended temperature range in the thaw box? 36 to 38 degrees. Remember your temperatures. Dairy products box is 32 to 34. Chill box is 33 to 36. Thaw box 36, 38. Reach in reaper 34 to 40. What's the temperature in the meat cutting preparation room? 50 degrees. Galley. 80 degrees living spaces. 70 medical spaces. 70. How often should ice making machines be checked for cockroach infestation? Every week. How often should you do a bacteriological analysis of ice? Every week. You would do how many? 1/4 of the ice machines that you have at the command should be done. Dry goods should be surveyed if you have more than how many insects per pound? Gotcha. 7. If you got more than 7 per pound, it's got to be surveyed. If you got 6, you got protein. If you have less than 7, you should freeze it for 72 hours, sift out the bugs, and then you're good to go. But it's a question they ask all the time.
So you're serious about that last part?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. What's the max time food can be held if it's not kept below 40 or above 140? 4 hours. Change. This is in the 5010 chapter 1. That also, when you're the one about the distance should be allowed between the tops of stacks of meat and the air ducts, is a new change in the preventive medicine manual. 6 inches, not 2 feet anymore. But the one in chief's going to have 2 feet, just like the one in chief says 3 hours on this. What type of bacteria is not destroyed by normal cooking? Staphylococcus aureus is not destroyed by normal cooking. What class of frozen sandwich is produced in a commercial frozen food operation in which the central kitchen is designed specifically for mass sandwich production? 3. How many classes of sandwiches? 3. How many classes of frozen sandwiches? 2. 2 and 3. Because 1 is dispensed over the counter in a mobile food service truck or vending machine. Also know that vending machines should be cleaned every week. An inspection should be current for the past 30 days as far as cleaning goes. Also know that, this is really, I don't know. In the chapter 1 of the preventive medicine manual, there's a supplement to it. They had a question on exam a few exam cycles ago. It had, if you had a hot sandwich machine, how long you have to wait before that sandwich is good to eat if you put it in the machine? And the answer is 120 minutes or 2 hours. Frozen sandwiches must be consumed within how many hours after removal from the freezer? 5 hours. What's the max amount of time that a frozen sandwich can remain in the freezer? 60 days, just as frozen sandwiches. Also know that if you get any questions on your exam as far as what you're going to put on the sandwiches, remember that mayonnaise is bad, mustard is good. Epidemiological investigations have shown that more than what fraction of all reported outbreaks of foodborne illness are the result of gross carelessness and deficiency in food service sanitation. 1/2. Which of the following food items are not more commonly involved in outbreaks of foodborne illness? Milk products. What's the food service sanitation inspection report?
20.
Tell me the first two numbers. 6240/1. Hospital corpsman holds a sanitation inspection how often? Every 2 weeks or bi-monthly. What type of food poisoning is caused by a specific group of organisms, namely the Salmonella and Shigella species? Food infection. How many types of food poisoning? 2. Food infection and food intoxication. Remember that food intoxication is due to a specific toxin produced outside the body. It's characterized by an abrupt onset with severe nausea, projectile vomiting, diarrhea, and prostration with low or no fever. Know that the foods that are most commonly involved with food intoxication are pork, ham, and salami. Food infection is poultry, especially turkey. What did I tell you about botulism? 60% mortality rate, the same as aspiration pneumonia. And remember that botulism is caused most often from home canned acid foods such as green beans or corn. Also know that except in an emergency, the local purchase of food items by Navy activities within the United States are limited to fresh bakery products and fresh dairy products. When the sanitary compliance score is 84 or below, all violations must be corrected within 7 days. If it's 85 or higher, it's got to be corrected by the time they do the next sanitation inspection. How far in the field is the head from the galley? 100 yards. How far is the dumpster from the galley? 100 feet. And remember that during the fly breeding season, dumpsters should be steam cleaned twice a week. Let's take a break. Okay, the health record is of significant medical legal value too. Everybody. Remember that all entries in the health record should be made in black or blue-black ink or typewritten. All health records shall be verified on receipt, transfer, and physical exam. It used to be they were verified 1 September, but no more. Receipt when a guy checks in, transfer when he checks out, and also when he gets a physical examination. Remember, when you verify the record, you should make an entry on the standard form 600 saying that you did verify the record. Sometimes, because of being behind in times and everything, they may ask you the health record is verified, and the answer they want is in conjunction with the pay and the service record. What chapter in the manual of the medical department gives complete details on the proper page arrangement of the health record? 15 is physical exams. If they ask you that question and they didn't have 16, what are you going to put? Say everybody picks another chapter out of there. You ain't gonna pick 23 because it ain't gonna do you no good. You're gonna pick NAVNet Common Instruction 6150.1, the instruction on the health record. What's 21? Pharmacy. 23. Reports and forms. What's chapter 1 of the P117? The medical department. What's 9? It's the hospital corps. Hospital corps was established 17 June 1898. What percent of the hospital corps is dental techs? 11. 89% hospital corpsmen, 11 dental techs. How many corps are there? 5. Medical corps, medical service corps, nurse corps, and dental corps, and the hospital corps. What is chapter 17? Death reporting. 18. Medical disposition. When you think of medical disposition, think of a NAVMed 6100/1, which is a medical board report cover sheet. 19. When you think of the 19, think of FMF 4-50. That's the Fleet Marine Force Manual for medical. 21, drugs. 22 is preventive medicine. 23, reports and forms. Death reporting. What's a DD 2215? It's a baseline audiogram. 2216 is reference. If an individual is appointed, enlisted, or re-enlisted with disqualifying defects which have been waived by it, NAVMEL, PERSCOM, or the Marine Corps, the description of each defect with authority for waiver should be entered on the 88 and the 600. What block of the 88 do you find more mistakes? Block 2, for not recording the officer designator, the Marine Corps MOS, or the Navy NEC. What is block 7? Block 7 is sex, and remember that sex is spelled out. You don't put occasional. The health and dental records of individuals Navy who have had prior service and have been discharged may be obtained by sending a DD 877 where? From St. Louis. If they are discharged, if they got out of the Navy after a 4-year obligation and they still have an obligation in the reserves, you'd request it from New Orleans. That's right. Know the difference. And when you send the 877 out, the 877 is a request for medical or dental records or information. You send it out in triplicate. What disposition is made of the health record of a newly appointed Navy Reserve officer who's on inactive duty and assigned to a drill unit of the selective reserves? You forward it to the drill unit that the person is assigned to. Who is responsible for opening the health record of a Navy man who will be enlisting in 2 months? Activity that executes the enlistment contract. Remember, if the person is ordered immediately to active duty, then it would be the boot camp, either the Navy Training Center or the Marine Corps Recruit Depot. Remember that when a person gets their physical to come in the Navy, the original 88 and 93 are attached to the enlistment contract and sent to BUPERS. Instructions for opening health records for civilians selected for an officer candidate program may be found in all the following publications except Navy Regs. Upon the apprehension of a Navy deserter, you'd request his record from BUPERS. If he was a Marine, you'd request it from the Commandant of the Marine Corps. If a person was UA, for how long would they be declared a deserter? 30 days. And remember, you would maintain the record for 180 days. The health record is closed on all but which of the following occasions? When an enlisted member is commissioned, you would change, or you would make an entry on the 6150/4 and the 600 stating that the person was going from enlisted to officer status, but you wouldn't close the record. What's the disposition of the health record if a man is admitted directly to a federal medical facility other than armed forces and hospitalization is expected to exceed 7 days? You forward it to the Cognizant Office of Medical Affairs. Situation: you are on a ship overseas. You have somebody aboard your ship who's getting admitted to a hospital of a foreign nation. What are you going to do with the record? Not if you're not getting underway. If you are not getting underway, you keep the record aboard your ship. If you're leaving port and there's another Navy ship in port, you would send to that Navy ship. But if you were getting underway and there was no other Navy ship in port, you would send it to the embassy or consul, and they'd lose it. If an erroneous entry is made in the health record, what procedure should be followed? You draw a line through the erroneous entry in black or blue black ink, make another entry showing where the original was erroneous. Which of below is not true concerning replacement duplicated health records? That's right. If a health record form is getting to the point where you can't read it, you should duplicate it. It would be marked duplicate. You would take the original, put it in an envelope, and file it in the back of the record. You wouldn't destroy it. Remember, if a person lost their health record, you would make a replacement, and know that every form should be marked replacement. If a person does not desire to state a religious preference, what would be entered in Block 16 of the 88? None stated. If he said he didn't want to state his religious preference, you would put none stated. If he said he had no preference, you would put no preference. If he said that he was an atheist, he didn't believe in God, you would enter none. If a person was Protestant, put P or write Protestant out. You could further break it down to Lutheran, Baptist, whatever. If they were Catholic, C or write Catholic out. And if they were Jewish, you would put H or write Hebrew out. If they were Jewish, you would put H or write Hebrew out. Which of the below listed individuals would not be classified as a Malayan? A Korean. A Korean is a Mongolian, not a Mongoloid. Most of the time, they'll have on the exam what is not a race classification. Remember, there's only 5. Caucasian, Negroid, American Indian, Malayan, and Mongolian. Remember, a Malayan is a Hawaiian, a Filipino, a Samoan, a Guamanian, and a Guamanian is also referred to as a Chamorro. And a Mongolian is Japanese, Chinese, Korean, and Eskimo. Race classification is what block? Block 8. Block 9 is time and service. Remember that time and service will be indicated by years, like 10Y, and months, 3M. What's block 10? Agency. Remember that that is left blank. Block 16 is religion. Block 17 is the specialty designator. If a person is a submariner, aviation, or diver, it's marked. If not, it's left blank. What is the preferred method of color vision testing in the Navy? The Phalant, the Farnsworth lantern. The height is recorded on the 88 in Block 51 to the nearest. Half inch except for aviation, which is 1/10. And remember that all aviation physicals must be typed. What's Block 44? Dental. And remember that if a person gets a physical and they haven't been examined by a dental officer within or during that physical, then they got to get examined at the earliest opportunity. And there's a 4-inch space in Block 73 reserved for the required BUMED endorsement for the aviation program. What part of the report of medical history, which is a 93, should be prepared and signed by the medical officer? Item 25. Remember, 1 through 7 is personal data, name, rank, social security number, whatever. 8 is a statement of the person's health. I'm in good health, I'm in poor health, or whatever. 9 through 24 is questions pertaining to him or his family, saying, have you or your family ever had certain conditions? And item 25 is the medical officer summary. He's got to sign item 25. What's the correct disposition of the individual sick call slip, DD 689? Okay. Transcribe. Once you transcribe the information, you throw it away. Remember that the 689 is used for cross-service medical notification between the armed forces. In other words, if you're on leave, you don't have your health record, you go to a medical facility, armed forces, they're supposed to fill out a 689, putting down what your problem is, what they did for you, and then they send it back to your command receives it, they transcribe the information on a 600 and then throw it away. And if they did that, people wouldn't have health records that are that thick. But they don't do it, and they haven't done it since I've been in the Navy. The only thing they use that for is like giving somebody light duty or something like that. What visual record should be prepared upon the determination of a need for corrective eyewear? A NAVMED 6490/1. Don't get it confused with a 771. The 771 is a spectacle order form. That's the form that you fill out to order the person's glasses. And remember, the medical board report cover sheet is an NAVMED 6100/1. The abbreviated clinical record is used in uncomplicated inpatient care if the patient is hospitalized less than 48 hours. If a person is admitted for more than 48 hours, what would he have? The standard form 502 narrative summary. But remember what it says in the book about the 502. It says that the narrative summary is used in lieu of transcribing the information on a standard form 600. They don't do it, but that's what it says, and sometimes they have a question pertaining to it. The present physical standards for enlistment, re-enlistment, or induction of enlisted men are contained where? In Army regulations. Just think who runs the MEP station. The Army runs it. You got Navy people working there, but they work for the Department of the Army. The recruit screening examination will be conducted within how many days after reporting to a Navy Training Center or Marine Corps Recruit Depot? 10 days. How long is a physical examination valid for separation from active duty, including retirement? 6 months, but you got to update lab work. How about re-enlistment? 3 months. They may ask you how long is the physical valid for induction, enlistment, and appointment as a reserve or regular officer enrollment and officer candidate program. That's a year. An entry should be made on the abstract of service and medical history, NAVMED 6150/4, for all but which of the following? When the officer is promoted. Don't get it confused, though, because if that person was enlisted, they got commissioned, then you'd make an entry on a 6150/4. But if an ensign was promoted to JG, you wouldn't close the record, you just make the changes on the forms. What form is not signed by the service member? NAVMED 5510/1, and you will very seldom ever see an exam that they don't ask you what is the uppermost form on the right side of the health record. 5510/1 PRP, nuclear weapons security. Remember, that's a big pink form with a big triangle. Standard Form 93, report of medical history, is signed by the individual. Standard Form 602, syphilis record, is signed in Section 2. And the DD 2005 is a Privacy Act, and it is signed by the individual. The record of exposure to ionizing radiation, which is a DD 1141, would be prepared for an X-ray tech. Remember that anybody that wears a film badge will have an 1141. Information for filling out the form is contained on the back of the 41. A patient undergoing diagnostic therapy or a physiotherapist is not required to have one. Remember, the film badge is developed every month, and an entry would be made on the 1141. What form is the uppermost on the left side of the health record jacket? The NAVMED 6150/20, which is the problem summary record. What is the form that you would use to do an overseas screen? It's a report of suitability for overseas assignment. It's a NAVPERS 1600/13. I haven't heard of that form being on the exam, but I guarantee you someday it will be. And remember that if you do an overseas screen, you should also make an entry where? On the 600. Instructions for preparing and submitting the monthly medical service and outpatient morbidity report are contained where? UMed Instruction 6300.2. Remember that the morbidity report is a NAVMED 6300/1. What's the second choice? It's the instruction on what? Instruction on TB 6224.1. Remember the TB contact/converter form in the health record is a NAVMED 6224/1. Remember that follow-up studies are conducted at 3, 6, and 12 months. The annual report of TB testing is submitted to BUMED by 1 February. How many months' supply of forms should be maintained by shore stations? 3 months. Ships, 6 months. Along those lines, food service equipment, how far from the deck, ashore? 6 inches afloat, 8 inches. The NAVMED 6320/18, which is a medical list, should be used to excuse an individual from duty for a period of 24 hours or less. This report must be submitted to commanding officer daily by 9:30. And the NAVMED 6320/19 is the morning report of the sick and injured, used to excuse a person from duty for more than 24 hours, submitted to commanding officer daily by 10 o'clock. And if a person gets sick after you submit the sick list, you would add them to the medical list. The complete, concise, chronological record of events of importance or of historical value concerning the medical department is the medical journal. Know that the statistical data log is used to provide documentary support to aid in compiling the monthly medical service and outpatient morbidity report and the annual report of TB testing. Know that 2 other logs that must be maintained are the water test log and the training log. What Navy directive of a one-time or brief nature, which has self-canceling provisions, usually remains in effect for 6 months or less, but never longer than a year? A notice. A lot of times they'll ask, what's the max amount of time that a notice can remain in effect? 12 months. Know that an instruction can only be superseded or canceled by the originating command or another instruction. Remember, the max amount of time that an instruction can remain in effect is 7 years. Know that an instruction in the Navy is equal to a Marine Corps order. Know that a notice in the Navy is equal to a Marine Corps bulletin. Which of the 14 major subject groups deals solely with the administration of military personnel? 1000 series, 2000. Telecommunications, 3000. Operation and readiness, 4000. Logistics, and what is the lonely 4000 series that you got to remember? Form. That's all right, guys. You got plenty of time. What is it? A NAVMED 4061/1 is the food service training certificates kept on file by who? The food service officer, and every time a hospital corpsman holds a sanitation inspection, which is every 2 weeks or bi-monthly, He would check the food service training certificate to ensure they received how much initial training? 6 hours initial. How much refresher? 6 hours unless they were temporary, and then it would receive 3 hours. Remember, temporary is less than 30 days. The 7000 series related to financial management. What's general material? 10,000. What ship's design, ship's material? 9,000. The Coast Guard? 16,000. How many major subject classification groups are there? There's 14. How many pertain to the Navy? 13, because the Coast Guard only comes under the Navy in time of war. Which of the 14 subject groups relates to all types of ordnance? 8,000. 5,000 is? General administration and management pertains to military and civilian personnel or matters that pertain to law and legal. 10,000 is general material. 12,000 is civilian personnel. Pharmacists shall be assigned duty at all large military pharmacies at fixed treatment facilities, filling more than 5,000 prescriptions every quarter. Which of the below are not permitted to write prescriptions unless authorized by the commanding officer? PA. PA or nurse practitioner. Remember that medical and dental interns can't write prescriptions for Schedule 2 and 3 drugs. How often should periodic checks be made of all ward and clinic drug storage spaces to reduce overstocking and to assure that such items are not outdated? Every month. Normally they ask that one, or they ask all drug orders for narcotics, sedatives, hypnotics, anticoagulants, and antibiotics shall automatically be discontinued after 48 hours. Which of the below listed drugs will not be stored, used, or dispensed by the pharmacy? Methyl alcohol is only issued and stored by the supply department. The person having custody of Schedule 1 and 2 drugs, Schedule 3 narcotics and alcohol, shall assure by physical inventory that all quantities received and expended have been properly accounted for every week. Which of the below is not true concerning controlled drugs, alcohol, and alcoholic beverages? That's right. You can fill a prescription, a telephone prescription, in an emergency. But read the other choices. The prescription should be dated, numbered, and signed by the compounder across the front of the prescription. The reverse side of the prescription should include the wording received by, in addition to the date, address, and signature of the recipient. Prescriptions for alcohol are preceded by an A and filed separately. Narcotics are preceded by an N and filed separately. How many parts to the prescription? 4 parts. S is superscription or RX. I is inscription, is a list of drugs to be used and their amounts. S is subscription, which is the directions to the compounder or directions to the pharmacist, and the other S is signa or signature, which is the directions to the patient. How long do you keep a prescription? 2 years. Each ward, clinic, or other activity drawing controlled substances from the pharmacy should maintain a loose leaf notebook containing a narcotic and controlled drug account record, which is what form? A NAVMED 6710/1. Know about that second form. DEA 106 is a Drug Enforcement Agency Form 106. If you do a narcotic inventory and you have a loss of narcotics, you got to make out a DEA 106. You would send the original 1 copy to the Drug Enforcement Agency, and you would send an information copy to BUMED and NIS. Know that the narcotic board aboard a large ship or at a shore station is comprised of 2 commissioned officers. One has to be medical service corps, nurse corps, or dental corps, and E7 or higher. And if you're on a small ship where you only got 1 corpsman, the board is comprised of 1 commissioned officer and the medical department representative. Remember that narcotic inventories are held monthly on staggered dates. Remember that narcotics for MMART is the same. They're inventoried monthly on staggered dates. When a member is officially declared a deserter, an expiatory entry of this fact shall be recorded on a standard form 600 and the NEBMED 6150/4. The health and dental records are then sent to the commanding officer, and he would put it in the package with the pay and the service record, and they would be sent in. Get out your MMARC, because we ain't going to have time to finish family advocacy. MMARC. No, they're too good a class, that's all. You know, I ain't behind anywhere else, am I? You can hear a pin drop most of the classes. Huh? Yeah. What BUMED instruction pertains to the Mobile Medical Augmentation Readiness Team? 6440.6, and that is the latest one. The one that's in the 3 and 2 book is the 6440.2. How many more teams are there? Well, there's 7. That's one answer. What else? There's 2. There's 4. Used to be how many? Used to be 10. Now there's 6. Know that MMART deploys for 6 months or less, 180 days or less. Remember that MMART is used for military operations, humanitarian relief missions, and FMF deployments. The Naval Health Sciences Education and Training Command must submit a formal training plan to BUMED annually by. You send it yet? 1 August. And know that BUMED publishes an annual training calendar by 1 September. Who is the MMART coordinator at a naval hospital? Huh? D. Who is the MMART coordinator at a naval hospital? It's called the POMI. P-O-M-I. That's the Plans Operation Medical Intelligence. Know that he is a special assistant to the commanding officer, and he does not deploy. Who is responsible to manage and maintain preventive medicine and vector control blocks in support of preventive medicine MMARTs? The Naval Environmental Health Center in Norfolk. B. The Naval Environmental Health Center is different than Naval Environmental Preventive Medicine Unit. What command normally has direct operational control over MMART assets throughout the duration of a particular exercise, deployment, or other mission? The receiving command. Know that the sponsoring command medical department activity maintains and assures the readiness of MMART component specialty teams or supply blocks. Personnel who deploy on MMART should have a Geneva Convention card, which is what form? A DD 1934. Remember that the Navy Dependent Care Certificate is a OPNAV 1740/1. The Navy Dependent Care Certificate is an OPNAV 1740/1. What's a DD2N? An ID card. Which of the teams listed below is not part of the MMART? Nursing team is no longer a team on MMART, used to be. Special Psychiatric Rapid Intervention Team is also known as SPRINT. The Medical Regulating Team, a lot of times they'll ask you what MMART team is designated to be split when necessary, and that's a Medical Regulating Team. Humanitarian Support Team, the Surgical Team, the Specialist Support Team, and the Preventive Medicine Team, 6 of them. Know that females are only allowed to be assigned to humanitarian support teams. They are not allowed to be assigned to combat units. The commanding officer will appoint each member to the MMART in writing for a minimum of 18 months. Remember, when they get clothing, that it is good for 3 years. If they're on the MMART, they get issued clothing. If they leave for 2 years and they come back, they don't get another issue. But if they're going for 3 years, you get an issue every 3 years. Know that special clothing for MMART is provided by the receiving command. Flak jackets and all that stuff. Know that the person is assigned to MMART for 18 months, but there must be another person assigned in their place. How long before they transfer? 3 months. What team or teams are on 48-hour alert on each coast at all times? That's right, 1 surgical team and 1 medical regulating team, and they are on for 1 month at a time. Which of the below is not true concerning MMART coordinator? He maintains a file on medical personnel readiness checklists of each member and reviews them every quarter, not every month. Requests for MMART assistance to foreign governments must first be submitted to the American Embassy. And from the American Embassy, they would go to the State Department. And from the State Department, they would go to the Department of Defense. From Department of Defense to the Secretary of the Navy. Secretary of the Navy to CNO, and he would task BUMED to provide the teams. Remember that CNO is the decision authority for approval of fleet requests for MMART. Now there's 5 forms on your MMART reporting. They are 6440-1 through 5. And his first choice is 64, not 6640. Who is responsible for issuing funded TAD orders and security clearance verification? The sponsoring command. And know that the sponsoring command is also responsible to arrange transportation for MMART members to and from deployment. And normally when you got MMART, they're going to ask you a question or two on your receiving command or your sponsoring command. The quarterly MMART readiness report, which is a MED 6440-1, must be forwarded to BUMED by the 20th working day of each quarter. Know that the Med 6440-2 is the status or the alert status report. And that must be sent to BUMED within 48 hours after BUMED issues an alert order. The post-deployment critique, which is a Med 6440-3, must be submitted to BUMED how long after completing a deployment? 10 days. Used to be 30 days, no longer by the new instruction. 10 days. What report must be submitted to BUMED when a team is absent from the command longer than 72 hours for training? This should be done 1 week prior to scheduled absence by a NAVGRAM. It's a Med 6440-4. That is a situational report. And the Med 6440-5 is the MMART block status report. And that's submitted to BUMED by Naval Medical Logistics Command every month. Prepositioned MMART blocks are placed on the below listed ships except the LSD. It goes on the LHD, the LHA, and the LPH. Also know that prepositioned supply blocks are put at 3 different areas overseas. What are they? Sigonella, Naples, and Rhoda. I don't know what the hell they do for the west or for the West Coast or the Far East. How many hospitals sponsor MMART? 8. What sponsoring command has all 5 MMART teams? Portsmouth and San Diego. The hospitals that have MMARTs are Bethesda, Portsmouth, San Diego, Charleston, Jacksonville, Camp Pendleton, Oakland, and Pensacola. I know a couple of them's closed already, but by the instruction I have to make another instruction out. What MMART supply block contains sufficient medical material to extend the capabilities of surgical supply block to care for 250 non-combat casualties, the majority of which would be women and children? That is the Disaster Augment Block 005. And I have seen them ask what the number of the blocks are. Task organized preventive medicine teams are available from the below listed areas except there ain't no DVAC in Charleston. The other DVAC is in Jacksonville. Do what? Well, if you read 6440.6, it says that there is a DVAC in Alameda. What preventive medicine block contains support items required to support a 4-member team in the field for 30 days? That is the basic field support block, which is an AMOL 021. They may ask you what preventive medicine block contains material to analyze water for potability and to perform health surveys for 30 days. That's the environmental health block, AMOL 024. What overall team readiness is indicated when the team/task force surgeon is not mission capable and can't correct within 14 days to 6 months? C4. Know that if it is C5, that indicates that the block is deployed. Know that if it's C1, it's totally up to snuff. They can't deploy if they are C3 or C4. What rating for personnel is indicated by deficiency correctable by the sponsoring command within 14 days? P2, there's only 3 classes for personnel. P3 is not correctable within 14 days. P1 is up to snuff. Another category they got is training. T1 is teams have completed the minimum amount of training. T2 is correctable within 14 days / 3 months. T3 is not correctable within 14 days to 6 months. What supply block category is indicated when all equipment contained in the applicable AMO is available and fully functional? A minimum of 90% of supplies are available. The remaining supplies can be obtained locally and sent by follow-on shipment within 96 hours. C2. And know that the definition for a C1 is the same thing, except the follow-on shipment will come within 48, not 96 hours. What MR team doesn't require any of its members to have a security clearance? The Specialist Support Team. Okay, we talked about the people assigned to MR that are assigned for 18 months. Know that the commanding officer must appoint a task force surgeon in writing for 3 years. And he's got to be relieved within 6 months of his deployment. What MR supply block is pre-positioned in the U.S. Naval Hospital en route to Spain? AMOL 009. See you tomorrow.